somebody gave me the name Jamie Butler. I gave her my credit card number, my name. That's it. And she started talking about, well, there's this young man here who says he's your son. And she was at her parents' house sitting on the floor next to her bed, taking the call. And he said he took his life and described what gun they used a gun, where he was sitting at his desk and what kind of gun he used. He was wearing one of those baseball shirts, the 3/4 colored sleeves, white vest. And he curses like a sailor. So, yeah, I said, well, that is definitely Erik. So we continued to have sessions. And at first they were like very personal, what could I have done? Did I do anything wrong?
Right.
Did you hurt? All that kind of stuff. But then I started gathering stuff for the blog members about death. What is death like? Crossing over? What's the afterlife like? Have you met God? What is God like? What is time like over there? Just all sorts of stuff.
And you just started asking Jamie questions, just generally speaking about the spirit realm.
Yeah. What their senses like, their emotions, do they change? Does their body change? And we transcribed an entire book about, it's called Memoirs from Heaven, My Life After Death. And yeah, the first thing he said when he first crossed over, he first met my deceased niece, but then he looked down at his body and said, oh my God, where's my dick? Couldn't believe it. Now, the publisher said, we need to change that to penis. I said, no, we're not. What is that?
Because that's what a 20-year-old would say.
Of course. It was very long for a 20-year-old guy.
I first want to start by telling you how I found you several years ago. This is the craziest thing. I mean, I love the resource that YouTube is. I'm constantly typing in different things that I want to learn about. I almost use it like my college. I'm constantly like, what do I want to learn about today? And I'll type it into YouTube and see what comes up. And I think it was maybe back in 2015 that I don't know how I stumbled upon the video where Erik was being channeled. At the time, it was through Jamie Butler. And he was describing his own crossing over into spirit. I don't know if that one was a video or just an audio recording, but I remember being just so unbelievably transfixed. And I just could not believe the information that was being shared. I just had to know more. So I subscribed to your channel and I started looking at your blog and really following this whole journey with you and your son and how he's being channeled through certain mediums like Michelle. And
only the best ones.
Only the best ones. And I don't know if you want to start by just giving a little bit of the backstory behind the Channeling Erik YouTube channel for people that don't know.
All right. Well, many years ago, it seemed like yesterday, Erik took his own life, 20 years old. He had bipolar disease, and it was really rough because that is the worst thing that can happen to a human being, to lose a child. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit at a disadvantage because being a doctor, I was all into science, and I was taught to think that for something to really exist, you had to perceive it with one of your senses or measure it with an instrument, right?
Right.
And I couldn't do that with Erik. And furthermore, my two parents were both militant atheists. I mean, I was not ever an atheist. I knew there was something more, but I really didn't dwell on it. So, I mean, my father, his first words to me when I was screaming on the phone, Erik's dead. He said, sorry, Elisa, he's going to turn to dust. That was his words of comfort.
Wow.
It's okay. He's gone now. Thank God. He was a horrible person. But anyway, that I need to tell you that because 3 days after Erik's death, I get a call from my father, a very bad, I will say evil man. And he sounded so panicky. He said, Elisa, I don't know what's going on. I was sitting in my chair reading my Wall Street Journal. And all of a sudden, I put the paper down and there's Erik standing in front of me like he's in the flesh. And then he morphs into his little boy self and crawls up into my lap and whispers into my ear, things come in threes in Spanish. My father's from Spain. I'm so startled. I don't know what to believe. So I'm telling you because I told you what my father said. Okay, so this is not a guy that's going to say that to me to give me hope, to make me feel better, okay? It really happened. As I started reading everything I could about near-death experiences and parallel dimensions and quantum physics, and oh my God, I got books and books. The bookshelves are sagging with all the stuff, controlled studies on mediums, etc. Another time, same time, my eldest daughter, who was a first or second year medical student at the time, decided to create a blog for me because she knew, I know mom heals best when she helps others. So she created the Channeling Erik blog, and I go, okay, what's a blog? And so it first started out as a place where I could allow people to share their own pain from any loss and feel loved and supported by the other community members. And then after I ran out of books to read, I decided, well, parents sometimes call mediums, I used to think, well, psychics are like gypsies hunched over crystal balls. Mom will give it a whirl. Sorry, Michelle. But anyway, so I
no shade.
Somebody gave me the number. Well, we actually had a friend that happened to be a psychic and medium, but she had major heart surgery, so I couldn't wait that long. So somebody gave me the name Jamie Butler. I gave her my credit card number, my name. That's it. And she started talking about, well, there's this young man here who says he's your son. And she was at her parents' house sitting on the floor next to her bed, taking the call. And he said he took his life and described what gun they used a gun, where he was sitting at his desk and what kind of gun he used. He was wearing one of those baseball shirts, the 3/4 colored sleeves, white vest. And he curses like a sailor. So, yeah, I said, well, that is definitely Erik. So we continued to have sessions. And at first they were like very personal, what could I have done? Did I do anything wrong?
Right.
Did you hurt? All that kind of stuff. But then I started gathering stuff for the blog members about death. What is death like? Crossing over? What's the afterlife like? Have you met God? What is God like? What is time like over there? Just all sorts of stuff.
And you just started asking Jamie questions, just generally speaking about the spirit realm.
Yeah. What their senses like, their emotions, do they change? Does their body change? And we transcribed an entire book about, well, it's called Memoirs from Heaven, My Life After Death. And yeah, the first thing he said when he first crossed over, he first met my deceased niece, but then he looked down at his body and said, oh my God, where's my dick? Couldn't believe it. Now, the publisher said, we need to change that to penis. I said, no, we're not. That's what he said.
Because that's what a 20-year-old would say.
Of course. It was very long for a 20-year-old guy. But anyway, so then he started pulling pranks on me and my family and blog members. Like one of the first blog members I remember was this young man from Ireland, Damien. And Erik just appeared to him and said, hey, dude, I bet I know how far away your girlfriend is. And she was like in Canada or something. And he never saw a ghost before, a spirit before. So he kind of freaked out. Okay. And he gave him the number and Damien figured out, yep, that was right. So apparently Erik got into a little bit of trouble for that. Didn't you, Erik? You're not supposed to do that. But he does pranks all the time on people. He will leave EVPs on the radio shows and maybe he'll leave one here.
And those are where you can hear, it's not, well, when you're in spirit, you don't have a voice box, but can you explain what that is for people who don't know?
Yeah, you don't hear it live. Like one of the first was, I was on the radio show and the host called me the next day and said, oh my God, I hear something that we did not hear live. And I go to the timestamp and Erik goes, minions. I mean, like that loud. And then Jamie chuckles and says he's calling them minions. I don't remember what it was about, but I mean, he does it all the time. The EVP experts are just amazed by the clarity of Erik's EVPs.
When you were first doing these early medium sessions with Jamie, who was the first medium that you ever worked with, what was that one moment where you thought, oh my God, it's really my son, Erik. This is the real deal.
Yeah, she did not know any information. Nobody knew what he was wearing or the kind of gun he used or where he was sitting. And I knew then. And also the cursing, he likes to throw around F-bombs a lot, but.
So what's so interesting is, and I think you and I had actually had a private email exchange because I had reached out to you and said, I'm an entertainment journalist. I do a lot of celebrity interviews with people who are alive in the flesh. And I'm such a fan of your channel. And there's a couple of questions that really resonate with me. And one of them is, what do you think you came into this life to learn? And what do you think you came here to teach? Which is when your son Erik is being channeled through various mediums like Michelle, who we're going to get to in a second. And you guys do these celebrity interviews, celebrities and newsmakers or public figures who have crossed over. That's one of the questions that you ask. And I wanted to start asking that question and I didn't want to do it without your permission. So I wrote to you and I asked, can I have your permission to ask that question?
Goodness, of course. This is all to be shared. But, these celebrity interviews, we don't intend for them to be voyeuristic or salacious. I don't like that. I want to learn from them because they are uniquely in spirit, but we're human. And so they can compare and contrast. So, I have learned a lot from so many that we have channeled. So that's the purpose. It's just to learn more about spirituality and about the human experience.
So, Michelle, you are one of the mediums that appears on the Channeling Erik YouTube channel, and you bring through Elisa's son, Erik, who is now in spirit. And the concept of channeling Erik is that your son, Erik, is channeled through various talented mediums, and he brings forward all kinds of fascinating information, as well as sometimes public figures who have crossed over. So, Michelle, what is your process? How exactly do you connect with Erik? Do you feel him? Do you see him? Do you hear him? How does that work exactly?
I primarily feel him. That's how I first started connecting with him, was through feeling. I do see him, but how I see him is in my third eye. So I'll see him as images. I do see very often like lights out of the corner of my eyes and images. So, for example, he's right here. So you'll notice I'm over just a little bit, and anybody that's clairvoyant will be able to see him standing here. He keeps touching the back of my head. So he's standing right here. So I can see, when I look into the camera view, I can see his image. I can almost see like the outline of where he's standing. So my process is, what I'm best at is feeling. So I know what his energy feels like. I've worked with him long enough now that I know it's just a matter of my intention. So when he comes in, it's either me calling him or him calling me coming in. I know it's him by how he feels. But the feeling, the more you work with it, and I didn't understand this earlier in life. Like, I understand this now, but I didn't understand I was always doing this. But the more you practice with it, that feeling turns into a language. So it's also, I'm clairaudient as well, but I hear through imprinting. So what Erik does is when he's talking to me, he's dropping thoughts. He's dropping imprints. So when we have conversation, and as a viewer is looking at it and saying, okay, like, are you talking back and forth as if you're hearing his voice? And I do hear his voice sometimes, but primarily it's like my thought with his, we'll say, his signature to it. It's his Erikness, I call it. He'll drop that in with a lot of images, and it's over time, it just kind of all works together.
Can you distinguish between your own thought and a thought that Erik is kind of impressing upon you? How do you tell the difference exactly?
Usually it's by the answer, but it's practice. It's a lot of work and a lot of practice of understanding my own belief systems. And that's something that he taught me. He taught me how to understand what I believe. So I really understand what's coming from me and why I would believe something the way I did. And because when Erik brings information through, I guess the best way to explain is there's nothing attached to it. So when I've got a thought or an answer, I can feel the difference between myself and something that's attached. Like let's say, for example, somebody was asking the truth about something. If it was me that was feeling it, I'd be like, oh, I don't know if I really want to say it to them this way. I don't want to hurt their feelings. With Erik, it's like, this is how it is, and this is how you need to do it. And it's because of this.
Your personality is not attached to the information at all.
No, I mean, there's always, what he says to me is there's always a little bit of my humanness there. You know, we're all different, so we do it in a slightly different way. But the more you do it, and it also depends on the person you're channeling with too. Like when I'm with Elisa, Erik is all there, because that line between the two of them is so strong and so clear that I get my clearest communication with him. But it's also, through sessions when he pops in and stuff too with people, sometimes he'll come through and I might feel myself. So I'm aware of it, but I'm also really hyper aware of hearing, of listening, know, and of being able to discern that. But that just comes over time with practice.
When you say that you can see Erik on camera, can you see him right now? Or are you seeing like an outline? Are you seeing a person? How are you seeing him?
I feel like I can make out an outline.
Yes.
Head. Yeah.
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You got it.
Wow.
Yeah. He's an outline of a person. He has there's like a thick outline, almost like an auric field around him. And it's just kind of like wavy material. Like it's right. I'm going to get right there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. And Elisa, at this point, after all of these years of doing this, are you able to make a tangible connection with your son, not through a medium like Michelle, or do you still need to go through?
I do. I mean, mine is more clear cognizance. I mean, it's just like a thought that feels like it's coming out of nowhere. So I know it's not mine. And I talk to him all the time, especially when I'm in my bathtub. But yeah.
Do you think a lot of people are confused about the fact that how does it work? Like, are spirits just hanging around waiting to be called? You know, how are they just there, especially when Erik brings through a third party, whether it's somebody who is, you know, that's somebody that everybody would recognize or whoever it is? Are they all just kind of hanging around? How does that work?
You want Erik to answer that?
Sure.
Okay. It's up to Michelle.
He says, yeah, he says hi. He's saying hi to you too. And he's winking at you. He's like, I know you. He's like, thanks for having me. He's a little bit of a flirt because he's telling me how pretty you are. He's like, isn't she pretty?
Oh, well, thank you.
So he says that it's like, so when we're talking about, say, the celebrities and something that, how that works is when a celebrity crosses over, because it's still the will of the celebrity. It's, do they want to come forward and speak? So we're not like grabbing them and pulling them in and saying, we want to have an interview with you. There's a process that happens, and Erik says it's like a vibration. So when there's an openness, and most that are crossed over in spirit want to give, they want to share, they want to teach. It's part of their healing, and it's part of helping humanity to be able to share that information in whatever way. And there's so many intricate different reasons as to why they do that. And so what Erik is saying is that it's vibrational. Everything is vibrational. So it says, think of it this way, you know, with your loved ones, with celebrities, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. He says, sometimes they're close and nearby, and they know because they can feel and sense when there's communication or an opening to have communication. So if you're setting up a session with a medium, or you're setting that intention makes a vibrational shift. It makes a shift in the field, which allows them to come in and respond. And he says, think of it like having a pager, like a beeper. You've got a beeper, like a text message. And so when you set that intention, that text message goes through, that beeper goes through, and they're like, oh, looks like it's time for a conversation. I can have a conversation, because it's then an opening for them to be able to communicate, which is actually easier for them than trying to get our attention on their own and have a conversation.
Got it. Okay.
Everything is energy, right? Sorry. And almost everything is on the electromagnetic spectrum. We are in a tiny little place called the visible range, right? So when people lose a child, for example, we're energy too. I mean, matter, Einstein called goes in light. Our energetic vibration goes so far down, it's at the lower end of the visible range of the spectrum. And here's our loved one, they're vibrating at a much higher frequency. And so they have a hard time getting that far down. That's why we say, I'm depressed, or I feel so low, etc. That's vibration, the frequency on the electromagnetic spectrum. And, you know, it's hard to see, just like it's hard to see hummingbird wings in flight. So, yeah, I don't know why I brought that up, but it's so much science behind all of this.
I think that what's so interesting about what I've learned from Erik is that everything is vibrational and energetic here too, but we're dealing with time and space and matter and these physical bodies. And we're also dealing with, tell me if I'm correct, some level of amnesia about what it's like over there or how things really work. We're kind of stuck in an illusion or almost like in a dream. And so it's very hard, no matter how many times you hear from people, you know, it's all energy. If you set your intention on something, it's the law of attraction. It's so hard to reconcile that with what our five senses tell us. So can Erik explain how to make that a little bit easier on us who are over here? How can we use that energy to our advantage, even when we're dealing with like matter and time and space and all of that?
Well, he says, first of all, he says, like what you said about intention, he says, the biggest thing that creates a density, aside from amnesias, he says it's your belief system. So you have to start there with your belief system. He says, how were you raised? What was your family upbringing? What does society tell you? What do you truly believe about that? He goes, you have to start there. And you have to really start in creating that intention of where you have been to where you are headed. He goes, and then also understand, he's like, Mom said it about the hummingbird wings. He says, understand that just because you can't see us doesn't mean that we're not there. He says, think about the radio. He says, think about listening to music. He says, you can be anywhere and you can turn it on. You can tune into a station and you can hear the music. He goes, but are you seeing the radio waves? Are you seeing them moving all in front of you? He goes, of course not, but it's still there. And he says, so the way that spirit is and understanding, he says, we're focused. We can tune into time and space to where you are. And you have to understand that you're like the tuner, like the dialer, and you can dial into any station. And we're located, our vibration, our connection is located with these different stations. So when you work with your vibration, with your energy, and he goes, and that comes from understanding who you are, what you believe in. It comes from healing yourself. It comes from understanding your core beliefs. And he says, and there's a lot that we could go into with that. But he goes, but when you do that, then you start to raise that vibration. Then you start to be able to reach frequencies and tune in and dial into frequencies that are beyond the five senses. And he says, but also understand, he says, everything that you have right now, you are still tuning in. He says, but it's what you're paying attention to. And he says that the time and space, he says, understanding about past, present, and future, he says where spirit is and where connection is in the present. It's where we are right now. He says our mind, which is part of our physicality, that goes back into the past. That's into something that's already been existing. And he's speaking in physical terms. And then our mind will project from something in the past into the future. So everything that is, our six senses, our turning into the divine, into spirit, is in the current. It's in right now. So it's practicing being present in this now moment.
And for people who don't understand this, and I don't always understand this, where is Erik right now, and where are all of our loved ones that have crossed over who are currently in spirit? Where are they? Are they here, but we're just not perceiving them because they're on a different energetic frequency, or are they physically someplace else?
Well, he says everything exists in the same. He says we are projected differently, we're seeing differently. He actually says where he is located, he says to understand in linear terms for our understanding, is he says our loved ones are about 4 inches off the ground. And he gives
I remember he said that. Yes, in sort of a parallel dimension.
So he says it's like this. He goes, we can focus and be in an environment or a space that is different, but we're actually existing all in the same space. He goes, so he's having me do this with my arms. He's like, you do this. He goes, you're actually not in dead air. That's not dead air. He goes, there's so much going on in this space. And he says, when you see, and he's like, when you see a movie and you see a spirit, he goes, spirits often float. He goes, how high did they float? About 4 inches off the ground. He goes, why do you think that is?
I was just going to say that. Why is it that in old ghost stories, you always hear about ghosts floating? Because their so-called ground is about 4 inches above ours.
That's right. And he says that's also why many people that have sightings, they say, I saw my loved one come into my bedroom and they were like moving like this, but I couldn't see their feet, or I couldn't see the bottom. And he says that's why. It's just the way that it's structured.
I think I remember him saying that there are infinite number of dimensions close to, and that they are swirled into each other, kind of like the frozen yogurt. I want a chocolate vanilla swirl kind of thing. So,
wow. So here's the other thing that people often think about that maybe Erik can help with. And I think that you guys have joked about this, or I know, Elisa, I think you have in past videos on your channel, but people will often say things like, well, I hope my dead parents or grandparents or whoever aren't watching me in the shower or making love or on the toilet or sorry.
That I remember. Yeah.
What does Erik have to say about that?
He says, you mean we don't? We don't? He goes, of course. No, he's just joking. He's joking. He says, think of it this way. There are, and he's speaking, there are energies that are earthbound that say are not crossed, and they can move in and out of spaces that may interfere with your privacy. But he says, there's many things that you can do with your free will to be able to protect that space and that privacy. But he goes, for your loved ones, for spirits that are crossed and your angels and your guides, he says, we really don't, that's not an interest. That's not really, he says, it's not really a focus. He says, do we communicate with you in the bathroom? Do we communicate with you in the shower? And he says, Michelle, you know all about that. And I do. He communicates with me in the shower the best. That is my favorite time to talk to him. But that's because I'm relaxed. I'm alone. Nobody's bothering me. I'm clear. But is he looking? No, it's not like that. He often shows me that the way that they're looking at us is like seeing our auric field, like seeing our essence, and not necessarily our physicality, although they can perceive that.
Interesting. Because, that's something that people joke around about. I don't know if you've heard people say things like that, but
I get asked that all the time.
Okay. What is the most effective way? And I don't know if maybe, Elisa, you've gained some knowledge from speaking to so many different mediums, but what is the most effective way for people in the flesh to communicate and just simply, I guess, talk to or bare their soul to a loved one that has crossed over who they miss and just want to talk to? Is there a specific way to do it?
Everybody, I'm sure, does it differently, but first of all, you have to recognize that they are totally aware of your every thought. You don't have to say anything out loud. They hear everything. And so just communicate with them. One good way is to, set a little tea and have a little time and, set a little cup of tea and some crackers and pretend like you're talking to them across the table. Another one I like that's really rudimentary is the hand game. It's where you acknowledge one hand as yes and one hand as no, and you ask just simple yes or no questions and see which one you get any sort of change in sensation, like coldness or numbness or tingling of warmth. It could be anything. If you don't feel anything, then you could just say, make it stronger, make it stronger, make it stronger. Okay. And of course, you can say yes or no questions using your own body, right? Show me your yes, and your body goes forward or backwards, and show me your no. And you can do the same with the pendulum. So there's all sorts of ways. And the Channeling Erik blog has a numerous posts under the category communication with spirit or something like that.
Okay. And what does, I guess Erik can answer this, what is life, I guess in quotes, life like when you are in spirit? And I know that there's no days, there's no months, there's no years, but what is life like exactly? What are relationships like? What is life like? And what goes on?
He says that, and because it varies, because the experience of life after life for a soul, for a spirit, is very different from one to the next, depending on, who they are and what they're doing. He says, think of it as, and this might be hard for us to kind of put our brain into, but he goes, think of there not really being the understanding of past and future, and think of it as one experience to the next, just melting into one experience to the next. He says things are very instant. So where we find on Earth where there's this waiting period, there's waiting periods. And he says, like, think of when we're manifesting, we're creating, because he says it's all creation. We our life on earth is creation, and our life when we graduate from earth is creation, but there's no waiting for creation. So when we're experiencing past our physicality, he says it's like a thought. It's like instant. So he says, what does that look like? Well, that depends on what it is that we're doing. He says he has many instants that he experiences at one time. So he's like, that's a little.
Yeah. Okay.
They can co-create with other spirits too.
Yes.
He talks all about this in his book. It's just an amazing book. I didn't write it.
It was written by Erik and it was channeled, right?
It is. You find out everything about death, crossing over, the afterlife, what it's like to be a spirit, what the bark on the tree is like. I mean, what your abilities are. I mean, it's just crazy.
I'll put it in the notes, and I'll also put it.
Oh my God! It leaves. There's no mystery to death of the afterlife after you read that book. And a lot of people are so sad after they finish reading it because they finished it. And very often, Erik, unless you say no, will actually prank the reader at some point. So
yes,
cool.
He will. He will. And that was my very first experience with Erik. My first very tangible experience was with that book.
So it was reading the book and then you got pranked?
Yeah.
What was the prank?
I got the book for Christmas Day, and my kids were all opening their gifts, and it was all busy Christmas morning, and I was sitting in the chair and I'm already flipping through first few pages and just right into it. And I had my cell phone was on my side of my chair, and there was a cursor. Like cell phones don't have cursors like laptops or computers do, right? And I look over at my phone and it lights up and there's a cursor moving all around my phone. I'm like, that's really weird. And I'm like, okay, Erik, if that's you, give me a really big sign. Like I'm talking like angels, big sign. Elisa's heard this a million times, but that night my parents lived next door. And so we went and had Christmas dinner next door. And of course I've got the book with me. I'm carrying it over to my parents with dinner and everything. Every chance I get, I just kept reading it because I was just so enthralled with it. But so after dinner, we're coming back home, and I had just gone through cancer treatment that year. And so I was healing and getting better and everything. And I'm walking across the lawn, and all of a sudden, all of these cars start coming around our court, like one after another. And they were all parking in front of our house. And I'm by myself holding a box of stuff coming back in from Christmas dinner. I'm like, what is going on? They all get out with like little angel books, angel wing things, and start singing Hark the Heraldry Angels Sing, like singing it to me. So I got my angels, but they were a choir that were serenading me, and I'm like, okay, I get it.
Oh wow.
It's you. And things progressed from there. But yeah.
On the other end of the phone call pranking, I remember one medium in India, very shy, kind of very prudish. She very commonly would have this client that wanted to ask all sorts of stuff about the afterlife and spirits. And the topic then was about sex, and can spirits vicariously enjoy sex when humans are having it? And all of a sudden her phone over here is saying the nearest sex addiction clinic is blah, blah, blah. It was one of those phones where you have to push the button to get Siri to talk. So that was funny. It really embarrassed her, and he meant to embarrass her, of course.
That is hilarious.
Yes, cute.
So with the manifestation over there, is it like if I was over there and I was like, gee, I'd love to be skiing in the Swiss Alps right now? Like, would I just be instantly there?
He says, but because the thought has no like step by step to it. So it's like as soon as that desire comes forward, that desire can be created.
So I would just find myself there, just teleport.
Yes. And he says, and so he says, because there's going to be people asking, like, are these places just yours or are they shared by others? And he says there are these creations that are shared by others. So there's collective energy that goes into it. So they're actually, like he says, like communities. And he says that the way that you can understand, he says about the bark, he's commenting about what Elisa was saying. He says, when Mom was talking about the bark, he says there's life to everything. things are alive. He says
That is what he said, yeah.
the colors, the everything is coming to life. The way that grass moves, he says everything has life to it. So it's like, he says, earth like 100 times and alive.
And also I think you remember him saying that buildings, some of the buildings, maybe all of them, I don't know, are actually made of spirits or something like that. So it's really fascinating.
Wow.
But yeah, if you constantly think about a beach, if there are different spirits thinking about beaches and going surfing, etc., then that sort of stays in reality as long as the thought is driving that quantum probability. You think, and then that thought creates instantly in the spirit world, of course.
Which is kind of like what happens here, right? We have a collective consciousness create something, whether it's even the pandemic, it's like a collective consciousness, right, that creates it, but we don't really quite get it. Like, we don't put two and two together. Why don't we put two and two together over here so that we can get our act together and stop being so destructive?
I think we're still in the remedial class. I can speak for myself. So
yeah. No, he says that's true. He says because we're in an evolutionary process of that, and he says, and that's changing. But that's exactly what he was starting to say when you said it. He was commenting about the relation to how we put our minds together, put our intention together here. But he says, remember that what we're heading towards, as he says, is more light. Everybody's creating more light, and more light is more powerful than darkness. And the reason why is because darkness is singular. It's thinking of the self, and light is connection. And he says, so we are moving to that reality, but it is taking time, because he says this does take that process of physicality that we're going through
chaos. We're going through a lot of chaos now.
Yeah,
it's like tearing down old structures so that we can pave the way to building a new world. And now we're in the Aquarius age, where that's supposed to be happening, where we're supposed to not be in the consciousness of polarity, of contrast, where we survival of the fittest, and to survive, I have to be this person. But it's unity consciousness, where we collaborate in order to survive and thrive.
Can Erik, maybe there's some hope for a light at the end of the tunnel. When is humanity going to get the memo that greed ultimately leads to our self-destruction? I mean, I don't think that'll happen in our lifetime, or will it? I don't know.
He said, we're already on a stretch of it happening more and more, but you have to remember that, he says, the way that things look right now is we see it as chaos and destruction, because he says of what Mom said of there having to be that nature of things crumbling down. He said that humanity has been in a space of fear for such a long time that fear is being replaced with awareness. He says, is that possible within our time? Of course it is, because it is.
Yeah, there's only fear and love, and fear, and there's many facets include greed and hatred and anger and anxiety, and then there's love, which is everything else that's good. And I think the first step humanity needs to take is to realize that those are the only two things, and you have to make a choice. Do you want to choose to live in fear, or do you want to choose to live in love? And when the collective lives in fear, that's why the pandemic gets worse and shit hits the fan. I mean, because, so many have chosen to live in fear. I don't know why. Yeah. Why, Erik? Why do people, is it easier to live in fear? Why?
Well, because he says that generationally speaking, we've gone through thousands and thousands of years being in the cycle of fear. And he says, and Mom, everything is cycles, and we get accustomed to it. It gets comfortable. Fear becomes something that we can expect. We start to think that this is what we've experienced before. We can expect this. It's like that old saying of what next? What next? And so it's more difficult for us to then think about love, because love then tends to be that bigger step. It's harder to take that step. That's why it's necessary for us to keep taking small steps forward as a collective.
Okay.
That makes so much sense. That fear is the default setting because it's more comfortable, and it sounds so crazy, but it feels safer to people than stepping out into love.
Love, people feel vulnerable, and we've got this misconception that society's taught us, maybe over the years, centuries, that living life with an open heart, this vulnerability is like cowardice. It's a weakness.
Right.
And it's not true. Being vulnerable, opening your heart to others, with the simple things like apologizing if you upset somebody or whatever, it's actually a position of strength and courage. So that's another thing I wish that humanity as a whole and individually would understand, that it is so cool to be vulnerable. It is strong, it's strength,
100% agree. Yeah. So I want to ask Erik, I know that his work is teaching through the Channeling Erik platform, but does he have any other work on the other side that he is devoting his energy to?
Well, he says if he were to give himself like a subject, he says, well, he himself as a soul is evolving, but he says he's evolving through work with humanity. He's helping humanity as a whole gain courage and awareness. And he says that his biggest platform is what he works with individually with his mother, which is connected to service. And he also says the service connected to healers, teachers, any mediums. He goes, really anybody connected to service, but particularly in connecting to spiritual senses, because he says that spider webs out into the rest of the collective. And he's very passionate about working very closely with those that are looking to grow themselves.
Okay. Does he pick certain people, or is it just more the collective?
He says that sometimes there are, he's putting everyone into groups. So sometimes there's those in the collective that will be reached through others. So he has a way of being able to envision and with the help of other souls collaborating with them to be able to reach larger groups, like say through the vehicle of 10 people. It can reach this larger group. But when it comes to, say, working more with individuals, a lot of those that he works with he has contracts with, he has agreements with to work with.
Interesting. Yeah, he seems to take a lot of up and coming mediums and healers, I guess, but mostly mediums from what I understand, under his wing, so to speak, and sort of helps them hone their skills, or at least confidence in their skills.
Mm-hmm. And Elisa,
anybody could just ask Erik for help, and he's there. I mean,
yes.
Wow. So you're saying, like, if anybody, is he still connected to the name Erik Medhus? Does he still identify with that name there?
Probably for me, he does.
He does. He says, I mean, we're all of us are greater than our name. Our name is connected to our personality on earth. But the thing is with Erik is that there's a very large collective energy with his name because of what he is doing, what he and Elisa are doing, what Channeling Erik are doing. So for him, there's a very strong vibration with his name. So does he identify with it? He says no, because egoically that part of him is more connected to his life in the physical, but he has he's going to say it like a love for it.
Okay.
Or like a love for it. And he identifies with that love because that connects him to his family on earth and his family through Channeling Erik and the greater whole with that name.
Is it almost like when any of us that are here sit down and maybe look at our baby pictures or old family photos and kind of like reminisce, like, oh, wow, that's, is it that type of feeling?
That's a good analogy. A good analogy. He says yes, because there is all of those good feelings. He says, especially think about when you might open up your photo album and dust it off a bit and see, your birthday party from when you were 5 years old. And it gives you those warm feelings. And, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was my favorite toy. He goes, that's a very good analogy for it.
Makes sense. Thank you. And Elisa, do you feel like this was Erik's purpose the whole time? that his purpose was to go through what he went through on earth, to cross over the way he did, and to ultimately be what he is now to so many people? Or do you think it just was kind of like, this is just kind of how things played out?
No, I do believe, because looking back, well, not even looking back, I always knew Erik was just special. I love all my kids, obviously, they're special in their own way, but I never heard him say anything, hurl a personal insult at anyone. He could get angry, he would never take them down. And he also was a magnet for strays. I mean, he'd go to Starbucks and probably the bum smokes, because his mom didn't want to shorten his life by smoking. Anyway, but people would be drawn to him. He'd invite them to sit down, whether they had smokes or not. And they would just pour their life story out to Erik. And he would say, come on, dude, we'll take you home. My mom's going to cook dinner for you. Thanks a lot. But he would take in lonely people, strays. And when we looked at his Facebook messages, it was like, until they memorialized it, hey, so-and-so, I hear you're having a hard time. Do you want me to come and sit with you for a while? Things like that. It was just incredible.
And yet he was so young. I mean, because his departure was when he was 20, right? So you would think a person wouldn't necessarily have that kind of empathy and compassion during those selfish years, right? When most people are.
He always loved women too. Even when he was 4 years old, your hair is so pretty. I love your dress. He was just very respectful of women, especially. He was a flirt, though, even when he was little. I remember he sat in my husband's mother's lap, Bestemor, his grandmother, and he said, nice boobs, Bestemor. Oh, God. And I remember at the same time, he was trying to teach her some English words. Mm-hmm. So he'd say, well, what color is the whatever? Well, it's such and such color. And then he asked, well, what color is your butt? And she didn't know what that meant. So she said, green. He says, your butt is green? Festival? I got a lot of funny Erik stories, I swear. Here's another sense of a story of compassion. I homeschooled him, and he was like 5. And every Thursday we would go to just a field trip. So we went to the vet, and the vet tech took him to the back and blah, 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 showed him everything, and came upon this jar with a cat heart in it with all sorts of worms coming out. So she was talking about the cat had heartworm. It's because the people did not give him heartworm preventative stuff. And he looked so concerned at that jar. And he said, did she make it? Like, if your heart is in a jar, it probably did not end well, Erik.
Yes, is there such a thing? Because I've read this, and I guess Erik could answer this, that we all come in each lifetime with certain life themes. And like, is there such a thing as a mystical traveler and I can't remember the other one, where there are some life themes where you actually come here in the flesh as almost like a teacher or an angel or somebody who came here to teach great numbers of people, and maybe not here to stay for a long time. They were meant to have a brief time, but they were here to teach humanity something.
Yes, Erik says absolutely. He says a lot of us, he says, not only incarnating as angels, different planets, and he says there's always a theme. He says each one of us that projects ourselves into the physical body, there's something that we are able to bring back, something that we are, he said, expanding our own consciousness and soul that then, has a greater expansion too. But he says there are some that will come here with a very loose blueprint, meaning that they may have a theme, and he says they may be here more for experiences, or like you said, that they're teaching. And actually, he's giving me an example. We did one not that long ago. Gabby Petito was one.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? That she was going to come here to have a short life. That was something that was already part of her theme, he says, so to speak. But he says there are still things that she brought back with her. He goes, so because there will always be something that's brought back.
That's brought back to spirit?
Yes, it's brought back into your, the way he's showing it to me is when we bring back our lessons, no matter what they are, it's like we're bringing them back through. He shows me all of these little molecules that join in with all of these. They look like fireflies, and they come all in with the rest of the fireflies. You're bringing all these experiences back. And this, he says, creates the collective field. The collective field we can all tap into. So he says, because we're all one, all of these experiences that every soul has, he says, when we understand that we're able to tap into this energy and we work towards doing that, it's a matter of reaching for it. He goes, that's why you'll always hear. You'll always have what you need in the moment that you need it. If you keep yourself present and open and trust and tap into it, it will all be available to you.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. And what can he share with people about when people like Gabby Petito, or when people make an early physical departure out of this life? Because you always hear things like, if somebody crosses over early in life, let's say if they're in their childhood, teens, 20s, 30s, even maybe early 40s, you hear their life was cut short, their life was taken from them, stolen from them, they didn't get a chance to really live. You hear all of those things. Is there such a thing? Like, what do people need to know about people who make early physical departures?
He says it's not about the quantity. It's not about the length of time. It's about the quality of what was experienced. He says, when you look at a child that leaves this earth at 5 years old, and that child was the most compassionate, loving old soul that brought so much joy to every single person that they connected with. He says that child lived each and every day and every moment with pure happiness and smiled through all the pain that they experienced. He says, if you concentrate on those real and tangible things, that's a life well lived. Yeah. That's a life that was given all of the properties and all of the values that we really do come here to have. And so he says, from spirit perspective and understanding in our physical body and in our life, that if we can take a moment and look at the quality, if we can take a moment and really look at what the life provided, not only for that soul, but for all those around them, and go into the love and the gratitude of that, then we can also understand that it's not about length of time. He says somebody could live on earth and live 100 years and have it be a miserable 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Okay. And do either of you, because this happened to me during lockdown and I never fully lost it, which I'm happy about, that something shifted in me because we didn't have too many things to do. And my only recreation really was going for walks in my community, like in 2020. I started to see the world, the earth, as very magical. So I'd go outside and I'd take a walk and I would just stare at the blue sky and the white fluffy clouds. And I'd look at the grass and I'd look at the way a tree or a flower was blowing in the wind. And it almost was like I was just born into this earth and I was seeing these things for the first time. And it was a beautiful, magical, transformative experience. I almost feel like I would probably sound like a crazy person if I said that to most people, like, look at the sky, look at the grass, but is that really how we're supposed to live? Are we supposed to just feel like, oh my God, we're living this magical existence. We have like bodies that move and we can, we have all of these things that we can perceive. Is that how we're supposed to be?
The reason for the pandemic, for the collective, it's like, finally, many of us learned how to be in present time, for one thing, but I'll let Erik expound on that.
He just said what you've experienced is an awakening, and an awakening is many different stages of it. And he talks about when we've all shifted and we've shifted to be able to experience the truth of our existence, that it is magical, that it is amazing, that it is beautiful, that all of these cells that make up us and how magnificent we are and what's available to us. He says that is what's happening. And what's challenging for many people is, that's true too. He says what's challenging, but what is the value of 2020 is that it was a very much going inside and personal thing. what's happening now is that going inside and feeling that magic is now starting to connect out to other people. We're starting to unite those feelings with other people and to share those things. But he says that is our true existence. That is the truth of who we are, is magic, is joy, is love, is euphoria. And he says what you had there was stepping into new earth, was like,
wow. Wow. So because I wonder, when I hear about the new earth thing, I'm like, will I be one of the people or will I be left behind in the old crud?
He says you already are. He says it's a consciousness. You already are.
So is there anything else that you guys would like to share? Oh, well, actually, Michelle, what is your website address so that people can find you?
It is thehealingheart.com. So it's the healing and then it's h-art.com.
Okay. And for Channeling Erik, people just can go to YouTube and just put in Channeling Erik. And the blog is the blog channelingerik.com.
Yeah. And it's Erik with a K. But also Erik and I do scalar energy healing. So you go to atlantiscalar.com for that. We use scalar energy, a scalar energy machine and an intent script, etc., to like help with cancer and autism and bring in abundance and wealth and all sorts of different things.
What does that machine do exactly?
Well, scalar energy is not on the electromagnetic spectrum. It is informational energy. It's the same kind of energy we use when we think. That's the thought. And that Reiki, just healers use. And it will carry information, okay? And it's helical, just like DNA is helical and informational. And it will, if I put in usually my scripts are like 14, 20 pages long. If I put for the age reversal, all the senescent cells in so-and-so's body are destroyed and removed. All the wrinkles, all the telomeres, blah, blah, blah. I put all that information in the scalar machine and it carries that information to, all I need is the full legal name and the physical address and it takes it to him. I started that because one of my relatives who I adore announced to everyone that he had 2 types of terminal cancer. And that was, years ago now. And, I've been working on destroying the DNA of the cancer, blocking out the blood flow. I mean, all sorts of things in that script. And he's doing great. So that's why I researched. I did not want this guy to die because we all love him so much. He's so awesome. So I just researched, found scalar energy, learned about it, got the transmitter and receiver. And, I first started on my family. Like I did it on Lucas without him knowing. And the thing is, it opens up portals that are supposed to be open in your energy so that abundance and creativity and stream of consciousness can flow through. And the next day he got a call. He was making like $13 an hour or whatever. And they called him and said, hey, we're going to send you to California. You're going to make $28,000 a month. So
shut up.
I know. And this one lady, I did it on her because we were trying to get rid of this negative entity. I have a picture. She found it on a selfie and she freaked out. There's this thing behind her, an evil looking thing. So we worked on her. And 3 days later, she got a check from some distant relative for $75,000. It's crazy.
That is so crazy. Okay.
And my other daughter, I did it on her. She made the highest step, 2-3 score medical school in the nation, much higher than her practice tests. So,
and this is just through you're speaking it into explain the process.
Well, it's more than that. There's
the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, I read the intent script several times, but I also have it in the scalar field and there's also a certain thing called the acrylic phase. It's really complicated, actually.
Wow.
You really have to know a lot about anatomy and physiology and all that. And anyway, Erik helps me pick the frequencies.
Okay.
So this frequency, stay there that many times, length of time, etc. So anyway, atlantiscalar.com.
Say it again.
Atlantis, like the lost city of Atlantis. Scalar, SCALAR. It's Tesla discovered it. One of the people that discovered it. And we have teachers who have called parents to say that, I don't know, but your kid's autism is getting better, is going away when we do the autism relief from autism thing. So I have to pinch myself sometimes. It's amazing. But anyway, I work so closely with Erik, which is great because I so miss him. And it's so nice to really be in lockstep with him every day, hours and hours upon hours.
Amazing. And I want to actually wrap it up by asking that question that I love so much to both of you. And I'll even ask it of Erik too. So Elisa, what do you think you came into this life to learn? And what do you think you came here to teach?
I came here to teach the power of love, how it's so powerful at transmuting energy. And I think I came here to learn how to accept love. I don't know, maybe Erik can verify that.
Okay, well, Erik, is she on the right track?
Yeah, he says, yeah. He goes, there's quite a few things, but that's a biggie.
I got a lot to learn.
And Michelle, what do you think you came into this life to learn and then to teach?
I would say acceptance and acceptance of uniqueness and vulnerability, definitely for myself, and teaching that to others as well. Most definitely.
And what did Erik come into this life as his last life as Erik Medhus to learn and to teach, I guess, while he was here?
He says two things that he's going to bring out is he says that one is purpose, that he spent his life searching for purpose for himself, and that he helps others find their purpose. He teaches that. But also he's saying loneliness, knowing that we're not alone. He says that that's something that he's helping to teach, and to teach that we're not alone here in life, and that we're not alone in connection with those that have crossed over, that we're never alone.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to end the interview. I want to thank you guys so much for doing this. I have to tell you, I was excited and nervous. I mean, because this was a really special conversation to me, and I can't wait to share it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're honored. Thank you for being the light worker that you are, girl.
Yes.
Oh, likewise.
Erik says you're such a service light worker. He says you're a networker.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. I try.
He says that you're an earth angel and you're connected to the Project Unity.
Yeah.
The Project in Unity. Is that something I could Google?
Project Victory Earth or Project Unity?
Project Unity.
Okay, then that means your guardian angel is, I think, Ariel. Guardian angel Ariel. She's one of the big ones.
Yes.
Wow. I feel so important.
Yes.
You are.
You are.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Erik. This was so beautiful, and I can't wait for this to come out, and I will talk to you guys soon.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.